Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Wilensky. You're watching the Tov Jewish News channel. With me today in our digital studio is Leah Aaroni. Leah Aaroni is the executive director of the Our People organization. Leah, welcome to our studio.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Leah, first and foremost, I want to tackle the question of foreign volunteers from other countries that came when the war broke out in Israel on the 7th of October to serve in the IDF. So your organization takes care of those people, if I'm correct. And I want to ask you, what is the size of this phenomena? How many volunteers do you know that came? And just, describe this phenomena in broad terms.
Okay, so first of all, as most people know, when the war broke out on the 7th of October, a lot of the Israelis or a lot of people who served in the IDF as lone soldiers and then went back to their own countries basically looked for the first flight to get back to Israel, came back to Israel, and enlisted in the reserves. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a very broad phenomenon. And just today I was talking to a woman who shared that her two kids were lone soldiers. They went back to the United States after their service. They were in college, and as soon as they learned about the war, they got on the first plane, came to Israel, and have been in Gaza or wherever they are stationed since. So this is definitely a very broad phenomenon. But beyond that, many people want to volunteer for the IDF, even Israelis who did not serve or who maybe even older and they're not eligible for reserve services anymore, and they want to volunteer. It's not so easy. It's not so easy to get into the IDF if you haven't served earlier. But there's definitely a huge wish for people to be useful, to do something, to take part in the war effort. And being part of the IDF is one way to do it. There are other ways that people can come and be useful and do things because everybody wants to do something to be significant in the war effort.
So, can you tell us of some countries that these volunteers came from? What countries are the primary origin of those volunteers? And if you have heard of stories of some surprising countries, unexpected countries that those volunteers came from?
So we're seeing a lot of volunteers. We're working mostly with volunteers who are not volunteering in the IDF. It's mostly people who are coming and they want to take part of our civilian efforts. I'll talk a bit about what we do and what the volunteers do as well. We meet people from the United States a lot, from the UK, from France, from Brazil, Argentina. These are the main countries with Jewish communities. This is where most of the people are coming from. But we're getting calls and emails and WhatsApps every single day from volunteers who want to come and do something significant. So, for example, our organization, we distribute food packages to affected families, to evacuated families. So people come and put the stickers, pack the packages, and help with that. We get shipments of toys from the United States and from other places where people send us toys. We pack them into gift sets and send them out to evacuated kids and to kids whose fathers or mothers have been in the Army service for 8-9 weeks now, and they really need that picker-upper. Just today, this morning, we had a group of 15 volunteers from the United States who came to pack sandwiches to be sent out to soldiers, 400 sandwiches packed in 2 hours. So these soldiers will have one less meal of tuna this week because they're eating tuna around the clock. Things like that. And there are many, many volunteer opportunities around Israel. You need to understand what you're good at, what you'd like to do, and then find that volunteer opportunity for you to come and be useful in the country.
Leah, I want to ask you about the motivation of those soldiers, right, and of other types of volunteers. Because as we all know, is that we have all seen in the West and in Europe and, in almost the whole world, it's really, tricky right now to declare that you're a Zionist, that you're pro-Israeli. Aren't these people afraid to not only declare that they're Zionists, but also go and fight in the Gaza war? What's really driving them? And don't they see the continuation of their stay in those countries as a problem after they went to serve?
So I'm not going to talk about volunteers who volunteered for the IDF. No, those people have they really have an Israeli identity. They've been in Israel, in the army. They served as lone soldiers here. So I think Zionism is not that problem. I'm talking about people who come to serve, in the various civilian capacities. So we did a women's mission about 3 weeks ago for a group of about 20 women who came from mostly the United States and Canada to volunteer with different volunteer opportunities we have set up. And one woman said it so like painfully. Said, "I've been sitting at home and crying for the past 5, 6 weeks. I decided to get up and do something and stop crying and just like do something." I think all of Israel and most of the Jewish world, we've had a trauma experience, and people respond to trauma differently. And one way to respond to trauma is by doing something and being useful and giving meaning to this experience. So what I'm seeing is that for a lot of people coming and volunteering and being part of what's happening in Israel is how they respond to this trauma experience. In Israel, in the first responders, they say that when somebody becomes a paramedic and they become a first responder, so it's not the first responder holding the IVF, it's the IV, it's the IV holding the first responder. When you hold the dripping medicine into somebody's veins, that holds you more than you hold it. So I think this volunteering opportunity for many people is this, holding something, doing something, and that holds you. This is what we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, if there's people that cannot come to Israel, they have to stay in Europe, they have to stay in the West, they have to stay in the US, but they really do still want to help Israel. What can they do from the comfort of the countries that they live in currently to help our cause?
So I'll tell you what our organization does, and we are in contact units. We're in contact with evacuee communities, and we're in contact with communities of Army families, Army wives who really have an extremely hard time. I have 2 son-in-laws who are in the Army, and I'm seeing just my daughters who are home with their kids. And after 8-9 weeks, how hard it is for the Army wives to be going through this process, how hard it is for evacuees staying in a hotel for 8-9 weeks, and there's no end in sight, is extremely traumatic and takes a lot of prices they're paying for this experience, and they will be in hotels for a long time. So for these 3 populations, soldiers, Army units who need certain equipment, evacuated families, and wives and children of Army servicemen, these are the populations we work with, and we try to figure out what they need as need change. People who are still abroad and who want to be part of this. For example, there's one group of women in New Jersey that decided they want to take care of toys. So they have an Amazon list, a wish list on Amazon. They send it out to their friends. People choose toys from Amazon, send it to an address in New Jersey. They send it to us in duffel bags. Every few days we get a few duffel bags of toys. Other volunteers come and pack them into gift sets, and then other volunteers take them to different communities around Israel and deliver toy sets. That's one thing. Other people can buy thermals and baklawas and the kind of clothing that soldiers need, because a lot of them were drafted in the summer and now it's winter, it's cold. We sent down electric heating pads to us so that soldiers in tanks are not frozen. It's so cold in tanks. So just having electric heating pads so they can recharge them and then stay warm. There are new needs that come up all the time. So some people choose to donate money, and that's very appreciated. And some people choose to buy specific products that they feel like toys or clothing or heating pads, or contributing to food for evacuated families that are staying in personal homes. So people can really find something that speaks to them. There was a huge outpouring of donations during the first couple of 2, 3, 4 weeks of the war, and now it's going down. But this is going to be a long war. We're looking, at least 6, 7, 8 months. So, and the needs are going to be changing, and people really need to be mindful of that, and continue helping the war effort in any way they can.
Yeah, your organization and you personally have heard, I'm sure, many stories of volunteers and of their help to Israel. For the end of our interview, I want to ask you to share, if you can, some touching, the stories that really touched you of volunteers, of their Zionism and of their wish to help Israel. Do you have any very stories that can really be amazing to our viewers?
So I'll tell you one story of volunteering. It's actually people who our organization before the war worked and continues to work with new immigrants from Russia and Ukraine. And there's a group of women in the Pisgat Zev neighborhood of Jerusalem that came to Israel 3 years ago. They're fairly new to Israel. They took their personal apartment and they turned it into a war room where they pack stuff for soldiers. The people, neighbors bring money, bring stuff, bring clothing, whatever is needed. They pack it up and they get orders from different army units and they send it out. So it started out was people coming, people being drafted, soldiers getting drafted. He needs socks, he needs underwear, he needs t-shirts, and they get it from neighbors. They pack it into a bag and they give it to the soldier. And then it grew and grew and grew. And today, with our help, they're getting more and more equipment and military equipment. And there are more and more organizations like this created by people who are fairly new in Israel. So that's one thing. And another thing we're seeing is the missions. We brought a mission, like I said, 3-4 weeks ago. We're bringing another mission of women to Israel in 2 weeks, and then in February and in March. And when volunteers from the United States, from Europe, walk around Israel and speak English, the Israelis open the big eyes. It's like, wow, you're here. We can't believe you guys are here. We can't believe that tourists are coming to Israel. Just today, somebody shared the story that he was walking down the street and he sort of, ran into the soldier. He said, "Oh, excuse me." And the soldier said, "Wow, you're American. What are you doing here?" Just seeing tourists, seeing Jews from America and Europe coming to Israel is already a big morale boost for Israelis. So if you can come to Israel on a mission, that's amazing. If you can come to Israel to volunteer, that's really amazing. If you can send a gift, it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be a game, a toy, some thermal clothing from abroad to Israel, to one of the many, many organizations that are doing this. It's amazing. I think in the end, we all need to understand that this is a group effort. It's not just the Israelis, it's the entire Jewish people who are in this together, and everybody needs to play their part.
Leah, thank you very much for sharing those stories. Thank you very much for this interview. It's been a great pleasure to to speak to you in this interview. I also want to say thank you to all of our viewers that listen to this interview. Please follow us on all of our social media platforms, and don't forget to subscribe to us here on YouTube. Thank you. Have a great day.